Oh dear, this story is doing the rounds again. Yes, we've got another team that is associated with Christian Horner. But I want to hold off on that for a moment because we've got a special livery to look at, and of course, this being Austin, it's Haas, and I quite like it. It's as subtle as you can get with having massive stars all over the engine cover and side pods, but it's certainly not an over-the-top design. It's not quite as lurid as some of their past iterations the last couple of years, nor is it as low-key as their 2022 offering. It's a balanced interpretation of the formula of adding a darkish blue to the already existing red and white motifs. What really makes it pure Americana is the video around it announcing the particular livery. You've got the cowboy music, you got the cowboy motif. It's pretty much all there. I mean, it pales in comparison in hearing Pierre Gasly saying howdy y'all, and Fernando Alonso saying, I can't wait to get me a hot dog. But yeah, the Haas livery is just continuing a trend which is becoming very clear is going to be happening for many years to come. Especially with Cadillac right there, the other American team going forward. So either Haas then have to top themselves even more, or Cadillac's just gonna go, ha, cute, here's my Americana. The main elements, though, are kept to the side pods as if the bands were a prison, and only small parts of the design escape into the rest of the car. Sadly, though, that is mainly down to the limitations of this current weight-saving era, and restricting colour to certain areas, and of course the domination of carbon fibre. Hopefully this will be less of a case next year, or it may be even worse, it depends on whether the teams can actually get the weight down. But yeah, I do like it. It's alright. It's a little bit of fun, and it's a well-established tradition at this point that Haas brings something to the table, be it a special livery, or a be-all or end-all upgrade, which a couple of years ago was the end-all of their campaign. And I mean, this is the United States Grand Prix, so what better place to do it? I mean, I'm sorry, Vegas, I'm sorry, Miami, I like the former in particular, but this is the US Grand Prix, which everyone around the world really, really likes, and the Circuit of the Americas. It's a classic now. However, the main buzz around Formula 1 right now is either to do with the McLaren fallout, and then of course what's going to happen with Yuki Tsunoda, and then what's going on at Ferrari, or more accurately, what isn't going on with Ferrari. And whilst I've seen from my own metrics that dedicating an entire video to this subject is not really worth anyone's time, it is still something I think is worth discussing at least a little bit. But do subscribe or like the video if you would like me to talk about this if we get further information. And given the situation where the team is right now, I think this is something that actually has some legs to it. Because let's be real, the situation over at the Scuderia is pretty bad by their standards. I'm a Ferrari well-wisher since the Schumacher days of the late 90s, and right now, the team looks disjointed with rumours circulating everywhere about almost every element of the entire package. Seriously, you name it, every single rumour that you can come up with under the sun is being attributed to Ferrari in some shape or form. You're talking about there being internal drama, people and elements and parties being ignored, people leaving, people thinking about coming but then ultimately not, jobs on the line, and lack of performance, next year's cars not looking so great. Oh, everything is being talked about right now. With even Leclerc's own manager suggesting, not just to his own client, but to pretty much everyone on the Formula 1 grid, that next year's driver market is going to be nuts, and that maybe it might be time to use your head instead of relying on your heart. That might be a hint to his own client. You then hear ruminations that a culture of fear runs rampant within the organisation, that traditionalists are blocking certain plans from going down, and that perhaps the executive branch of the Ferrari company, the road one, are beginning to realise that them trying to take over the Scuderia and breaking down the divide that Enzo himself established isn't all that simple. Elkan can't just walk into Maranello and say, hey, I own you now. No, it's going to be a very, very messy transitional period. Could Ferrari end up not being in Formula 1 in the next few years? Well, I mean, certainly, it's not looking great for them now. And it's really obvious to see that the managerial style of Fred Vasseur, one which I particularly like and does work wonders at other teams, simply does not work at Ferrari, where you've got so many people just digging in their heels for the sake of tradition. And yes, I know that Fred's contract was renewed before this year's summer break, but the matter I think is not squared away, because if the right man came along, Fred could easily be ousted by Elkan and co. which makes the notion that Aston Martin team boss Andy Cowell dropped last week that Horner has been ringing around multiple teams, except for Williams clearly, as noted by Vowles. Ferrari might have been one of those teams that he actually called, but we have heard this before. Because the idea of Christian Horner going to Ferrari, it's existed since before the whole 2024 allegations took place. But now, it seems like this might be the only place that might actually be able to stomach the personality of Horner. You know, the whole culture of fear angle. Maybe they need somebody who's equally able to dish out his own element of fear, that they could cancel each other out, and then you end up with this sort of harmony in some shape or form, an ironic sense of harmony, that clearly if there's something pushing back at anyone who's leading, you need that leader to push right back and then dominate them. Maybe that might be the only way for Ferrari to see sense at the moment. Because there are reports suggesting that John Elkann is fed up with Fred and is ready to strong-arm a change in the dynamic once again, having already proven that it was possible with his own mission to sign Lewis Hamilton, that he will do anything to make it happen with any means or funds necessary. And a clear sign of desperation on Elkann's part as well, given that Ferrari's own stock price has crashed 23% in the last 5 days alone. Now, I must stress this because many people have pointed this out in the comments. This has nothing to do with how bad the Ferrari F1 team is doing, but it's clearly showing that their performance is in no way, shape or form helping the stock price crashing. It's to do with a speech that John Elkann made not that long ago, really diminishing the financial expectations of the Ferrari car company going through the rest of this decade. Clearly, the shareholders are running away in droves, and who's to say that John Elkann's job might not be on the line as well? He could easily be out, so this could easily be getting Christian Horner in, some kind of last gasp maneuver to bring in somebody with a proven track record, and therefore bring many people back in thinking that their Halo product, because Ferrari doesn't usually rely on traditional advertising, it tends to rely on its race teams to be able to provide kudos for every sort of demographic. We all thought it was the F1 team, but arguably the World Endurance team and AF Corsa are doing their own lion's share as well. So yes, I do think the idea of Horner going to Ferrari, as of now, given where Ferrari is valid food for thought. Of course, we need more than just another rumour to chew over for a full video, but let's just say that this association makes the most sense given what Ferrari's going through. They clearly operate under fear, and maybe even thrive under it. So maybe get somebody who equally thrives by ruling with an iron fist and knock stubborn staffers into line or out of the company with a track record which is undeniable. And maybe some Horner loyalists from Red Bull might suddenly come in on their own, using the experience they've attributed from Red Bull, and that might prop up Ferrari's brain drain, which has been happening in the last few years. Now look, I like Fred. There are many fans who like Fred. The drivers at Ferrari like Fred, Charles and Lewis, but clearly there are many powerful people within the Ferrari organisation who just don't. And that extending his contract in the summer was the only viable option they had at that time. And I do sense that if Horner was coming in with terms that were actually agreeable with Ferrari that they would be able to stomach, then Fred would be sent packing. And I think one of the first things that Horner would do as team principal, if there were any elements of Charles or Lewis wanting to leave, he would say, "Hey, get on the blower to Mark Webber. That Oscar lad, it's certainly worth giving him a go." Because actually it would tie into the Oscar going to Ferrari rumours quite well, since Christian Horner has been saying for a very long time that he rates Piastri, and he has many reams of telemetry data with his time at Arden to prove it. But don't worry, that's all I'm going to be saying on the matter right now, because there is another important matter. An update from what we heard a couple of years ago regarding conflict of interest and Susie Wolff over at F1 Academy. The FIA is still reportedly being dragged through the legal system by Susie Wolff, who responded to the allegations of a conflict of interest which started in 2023 regarding her and her relationship with Toto Wolff. This being an ongoing investigation and inquiry, Wolff is unable to divulge much detail other than it's ongoing, and that she wishes to bring forth accountability and transparency, as mooted by long-term friend and colleague Lewis Hamilton. Quite frankly, this is a thing that was very, very valid, because the FIA's justification in pursuing quibbles regarding conflicts of interest by Susie Wolff were completely unfounded. These were based off of publications from Business F1, a sketchy operation, that the idea that the FIA would actually go into an investigation off of the back of that and not their own internal investigations or whistleblowers within the system was completely and utterly ridiculous. And also, Susie's voice is very difficult to suppress because she is very much in cahoots with Stefano Domenicali, the boss of Formula One management, the commercial side of Formula One, and F1 Academy is very important to the entire widget. It is very steadily evolving, but it is also very much improving year by year. And I am very sad to see the departure of Leah Block at the end of the year, and I wish her well in her future endeavours. I mean, yeah, this will most likely fizzle out into just some kind of settlement out of court or something like that, but right now, given the fact that Mohammed bin Sulayem, the current FIA president, is likely to be going into a second term unopposed, despite multiple examples of other people putting in their hats into the FIA presidential elections in December, it's just another example of just like, hey, it's a little win, but it's not a big win, but it's something. And it's nice to know that it's still going and that Wolf is not through with Sulayem. But still, Business F1 of all places? Really? That's the backbone of your campaign against Susie? Come on. And oh yeah, expect McLaren to be under the microscope by all concerned and Max and George to milk it for all that it's worth. But I've already talked about that ad nauseum the last couple of weeks, so I'll leave a link to yesterday's video up here, or you could go up there. It depends where YouTube actually puts the particular link. And we'll just move on to the actual track itself, the Circuit of the Americas. A track we've been going to since 2012, which has been accepted into the bosom of F1 fans across the world. It's basically a greatest hits album stitched into Texas limestone, or movable marshes if you recall the news regarding wrinkles in the track, and that the actual level of elevation changes year by year. But the track itself, oh, there's a reason that it's part of my dream circuit. Seriously, the launch uphill into turn 1, it is iconic. And the fact is though, that left turn, which goes on for forever and then actually doesn't, easily leads to some spectacular crashes or barges, and was one of the examples of the relationship between Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton dissolving even further. Then you're thrown into some kind of Silverstone-esque circulation, not nearly at the level of Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel, but it's certainly a nice little facsimile for a Tilcadrome. But yeah, when you actually look at the circuit, the first half of this is really, really relentless before it then opens up at the top and then goes all the way back down again. And then, of course, you think the best overtaking opportunities around turn 11, turn 12, then, of course, turn 1. And then you add on the element of a sprint, for real this time. I kind of jumped the gun when it came to saying that Singapore had a sprint race, but then that's not until next year. I guess maybe the fact that I heard there was going to be a sprint at Singapore next year kind of just short-circuited my brain. Needless to say, having that sprint easily chops practice time, it easily leaves teams and drivers on the back foot, but that's good entertainment for us. And hey, if there is a place for a sprint, Austin is not a bad place to have it, but still, I really am sad that the Red Bull Ring was not given a sprint race, especially for the fact that I paid for a ruddy ticket. So expect cars that are quick right out of the box and they don't need hours of coaxing, that they're not total divas to really thrive around here. We all thought that was the RB21 for the longest time, but clearly just relying on the driver's own input is allowing Red Bull to find its groove again, and the constant patches with the front wing in particular, as well as other elements, are bringing Max's car back into play again. Oh, and yeah, we don't have to worry about rain at all. We actually might be probably getting a heat hazard. And oh yeah, Pirelli's bringing something interesting as well. They're bringing again stepped compounds, which unfortunately means we are getting the C1 tyre, which is incredibly dull. It's just simply too good. Like how the C6 is too bad, in that it, as Max said, it's probably better to just leave it at home. So you've got the medium C3s and the soft C4s, and the idea of this choice is to discourage the immediate decision to just simply do a one-stop and then go down the pub. You might be able to think of a two-stop, that there might be some sort of justification in which to do so. And considering the McLaren pit crew have had their own fair share of slow stops with no new equipment blessed to them before next year, it's yet more pressure on their shoulders for no more foul-ups. Or, of course, either Oscar or Orlando fans to point at the pit crew and go, "Foul!" Because let's just make it clear, for the sake of team balance, Piastri had his own slow stop around Singapore to really rub salt into the wound, and put pay to any potential chances of us actually seeing Norris and Piastri go toe-to-toe on the track, as well as Verstappen right at the front of it. It would have been a mad battle for second. As to who could score between 6th and 10th, well, I usually have these points a little bit more open. They are just vague theories, but given the uptick of Kimi Antonelli, I could see him bagging more points and maybe even breaching 100. He's rediscovered his qualifying pop after his little kick in the butt from Toto, according to him, and his decent racecraft recently and maybe a clean sprint, and then a clean race could set him up for maybe 6th or 7th. One of the two Williamses could squeak themselves into the top 10, but given that Carlos has had an uptick in pace and Alex has been consistent throughout the year, it could be anyone's guess as to which FW47 actually gets the cream. Or, as of course fans would hope, both of them get a double points finish, and naturally that would be the icing on the cake for the likes of Williams. Then of course Lewis Hamilton, this is one of his best tracks. He adores this circuit, but unfortunately the car as of this moment, and arguably according to all the rumours the team, clearly don't get on with him. And that maybe he could be in contention for having a nice little battle with Antonelli, but in trying to broach the top 5, it might be just a bridge too far with the car in its current guise, especially when you find out that Ferrari might have been actually not looking at the idea of flexi wings at all after TD18 broke out. So basically it's just a case of Ferrari just trying to survive and make do. Yuki is a bit of a wild card with late race aggression, but yet he's also had to quell that by not being the hero and making constant calls on the fly. And I would expect him to at least score 1 point this weekend, provided he can get into Q3, and, as Meki's put it, not have a shocking start. So yeah, basically you could say both Mercedes will score, both Ferraris will score, you might get a Williams in there, and then Yuki will prop up the table with one of the other lower midfield teams somewhat squeaking in. Maybe Haas might get a dream couple of points, who knows. But you are here now for my top 5 predictions if you've made it this far into the video, which I do applaud you immensely. I tip my spanner to you. But here they are. In 5th place, I have Charles Leclerc. And my goodness, what a difference a year makes, eh? This time last year, Ferrari went into one of their strongest weekends of the entire 2024 season. They secured, in the main race, a 1-2. Charles Leclerc winning, and the Austin Grand Prix being the last time that the Monegasque actually has won a Grand Prix. And right now, I'm thinking he's just propping up the top 5. But let's be real, 2025 has been an absolute grind for him, and he's just having to make do with what he's got. He and Lewis having to act essentially as passengers, the 4th force of Formula 1. The positives are there, though, that he is very much vibing with this particular circuit. He can easily work with tyre degradation, provided the temperatures doesn't get too hot, but at the same time, the temperatures could easily exceed expectations of 32 degrees, and that will make the Ferrari's prospects of getting into the top 5 that little bit harder, and it will be the two Mercedes that do so as well. I do think that Antonelli will not be that far behind. As long as the rears stay in the window, though, I do think Charles is good. But the fact is, though, is that the reliability regarding the rear brakes has been a real big sticking point, and the fact that the front wing has been very much neglected when in comparison to Mercedes and Red Bull. We are probably going to be saying, as I mentioned earlier, a heat hazard warning coming for all of the teams, which will mean that there will be some means of compromising or having to limit certain elements of the car. And ride control over the bumps of Austin, which can easily change from year to year, that could easily make the situation entirely unpredictable. And they'll only have one practice session to be able to refine and fine-tune. We talk about the Chinese Grand Prix being the moment when the plank issues became apparent, but not that long ago, Charles Leclerc was disqualified around here for plank wear at this circuit due to all the bumps and the ride height, etc. That same thing could happen again if Ferrari get a little bit too frisky, so they've got to be really careful here. That could easily limit them to 5th place being their pinnacle. So with that sprint weekend element in mind, the Ferrari variance goes up. It could be spectacular for them, it could be disastrous for them, who knows. But I do think Leclerc's mindset is solid enough to expect that P5 is a good enough outcome that he might not try and salvage anymore. Maybe if the temperature turns out to be a little bit cooler or there is a little bit more cloud coverage, that might then help out the Monegasque that little bit more. But these are all ifs and buts and maybes. There are no definite assertions that Charles and Ferrari can get anything higher than 5th position right now. With 4th place, as I mentioned earlier, going of course to George Russell. And really? You're expecting George to be 4th place, given the fact that his momentum in the last couple of races has been nothing short of fantastic, that even though he's not really in contention for the world title, he's certainly cementing himself in 4th place in the championship, best of the rest, what have you, and really justifying the case for him to have a contract extension, which the talks are still ongoing into the middle of October, right before my birthday tomorrow, and you're just thinking, I would like that to be my birthday present, please, Toto. Giving George and Kimi a contract, that'd be great. And yes, he converted a pole to win in Singapore, as he said, his most dominant weekend of his whole career in Formula 1. And Baku was very much a tour de force in him going from 5th to 2nd. But the reality here is, though, is that we don't know for sure whether or not the W16 has finally cracked the heat problem, or whether or not Singapore was a bit of a fluke. Because for a long time, James Allison and his crew, Andrew Shovlin, they weren't entirely sure why they were that dominant around Singapore. Maybe by now they might have a bit more of a clue and they might be a little bit quicker. I do think right now, given that element of doubt and that uncertainty, 4th place is not entirely crazy. It's finishing behind Max and the 2 McLarens. That is not exactly a bad thing. So I do think the team wants a repeatable outcome to really trust the data they've passed through. Unlike the Ferraris, which are basically just having to suffer in relative silence, and the 2 McLarens are really duking it out, Max is going for broke. George right now is in a very serene place. He's just going out there to race as best as he can. He feels like he's proved himself well enough to Toto, that he's managed to really put Kimi in his place whilst also working well with him. Life is good for Russell. This might be a year similar to Max, albeit to a lesser extent, that people are now going, perhaps I was too harsh on you, George. And if Friday's correlation is really, really strong, they get their data down good, they could easily be in contention for the podium places in either the sprint or the race, but it's down to them really getting it right, because if they don't, there'll be very little time to correct things, and it can easily send them off course and mean that 4th place is the limit of their potential. So on the tyres, it wouldn't surprise me that he does something similar to Leclerc, since George is a bit of a tyre whisperer, that he can easily make those C1 tyres go as long as they possibly want. Maybe he too might start on the softs. We might see plenty of those just to get a really good start off the line, and given that Verstappen didn't see them completely fail, it might be a valid alternative to try and get the jump on people, unless he does end up, George, in the top 3 places in Q3. Maybe then he might go for something a little more conservative and make good for the fact that honestly, he's one of the best starters on the grid. Seriously, the amount of times where Russell has been a fly in many of the other drivers' ointments regarding starts and losing positions from George's part, oh yeah, he is a real menace. And in P3, I am putting my boy, Oscar Piastri. And no, this is not me continuing on my reverse jinx of saying, oh, Oscar's not going to win, and then suddenly he wins. No, it's down to the fact that his track record around COTA is a little bit too limited. A DNF and a P5. Not really much to go on, despite the fact the MCL39 is still the fastest car out there, albeit the gap is rapidly decreasing. So therefore, I am expecting him to lose yet further points to Max and Lando, but also thinking damage and limitation, and this being a track where he's not exactly had the fondest of memories, despite really loving America, that maybe this might be the best of the bad situation. Because let's not forget, Austin was the place where Oscar's really bad time, the end of season slump of 2024, began with that track limits violation, which put him on the back foot for the sprint. He was out in SQ1 and he didn't really recover. He finished barely in the top 5 last year. Nevertheless, though, we could easily maybe see an uptick in performance, and a P3 would not be a bad improvement from P5 last year and not finishing the year before that. He has banked many wins on a multiple range of circuits, and there have been ones especially with high downforce twisty-turny bits. That first part of Silverstone, Oscar was on fire, before of course the safety car penalty. And the risk calculus is different to Norris as well, because Norris, Max, they're going hell for leather, whereas Oscar really has to think with his head and make sure that neither driver actually gets the better of them in terms of psychological warfare. Because even though he would ideally not like to decrease the 22-point cushion that he already has, I mean, a DNF could easily see him behind Norris if he were to win, and Oscar didn't get any points at all. But this is a track where there are a lot of unknowns. It really depends on whether Oscar gets the proper track time to be able to ramp things up and then get a good sprint result. If he can do that, then maybe there might be a chance for him to get that little bit better. I don't expect him to be a distant third or anything like that, but nor do I think that he's going to be really giving the beans and then doing anything silly. And also, there is the element of a doubt in the back of his mind about whether or not the team are playing fair or not. I know that the team have been doing their best on social media to prove that Oscar is a very integral part of the team, and that many conversations have been probably had internally, but there will be that little uncertainty in the back of his mind regarding pit calls and strategies. I think that Oscar will be playing it safe, and maybe hoping for the best if the tyres do come to him, if he can make them last, if he can actually make the most of his smoother driving style in comparison to Lando. especially if tyre degradation turns out to be worse than expected and that the C4s turn out to be absolutely useless. So there are opportunities for Oscar to finish ahead of third place, but I'm just limiting my expectations, with second place going to Max Verstappen. Because out of all of the people within the top 5 that are really gunning for some big points here, Max's record here is the best, because since 2018, he has been on the podium when we've actually come to the Circuit of the Americas. It would have been 2017 had he not been dropped down the order due to track violations. And so needless to say, Max really likes this circuit. He is very good around here. And even though Red Bull acknowledged at the beginning of the season that they were not going to be the quickest car, they have very much caught up leaps and bounds, and it really does give you wonderings that maybe Max could be in contention of winning the Austin Grand Prix. And if he could do that here, that'd be a really big sign that this car has been able to recover, and that all of the processes, the checks and reevaluations that Mekis and his crew have made might have actually been worth it, that they can be proud of what they've been able to recover. And also, I just get the sense that Max is on it because all of the comments that he's made in recent times have not been doom and gloom. They've actually been quite realistic, pragmatic. And it really wouldn't surprise me if he decides to try and pull the same stunt around here as he tried to do around Marina Bay by going on the softs, trying to just take the lead and dictate the pace, and then go in for the long haul and make do with his lot, which has actually paid dividends for him in past races. Didn't quite do it in Singapore, but I do think it really hinges on him being on the front row, because if he's not on the front row and it turns out to be a McLaren lockout, he is going to have to rely on Norris and Piastri taking barbs out of each other, or some kind of virtual safety car element to try and flip the order and get the undercut on them. There are multiple opportunities for him to take the win, but it's going to require a lot of sort of variabilities that I'm really not confident enough to give here. But let's just say it is going to be a doozy. I don't think it's be a cakewalk, but who I do think is going to win the Austin Grand Prix, one Lando Norris. Because I do think with the MCL 39, he will be able to get his first win around here, because he really does like this circuit. He has been steadily improving over time, and it got to the point where he finished as high as second. He was on pole here last year. He did fall down to fourth, of course, but there would be many examples for him to say that, yeah, in qualifying, he really does know this circuit well. And if he has the car behind him, then all the more likely to suggest he will get pole, sprint pole, and then maybe go on to win. It could be the best opportunity of the season for him to maybe get his first Grand Slam. But it really depends on how hot on his tail Max is, and whether or not Oscar's uptick in performance throughout this year, which has been incredible in of itself, continues to ascend, and we don't see the descent that we saw in 2024. Which I do think is something that Lando is banking on for his own championship hopes. I do think Lando has a good chance here, especially with the stepped compounds being introduced here, as well as the sprint format. Especially given the fact that McLaren tend to bring out a more solid baseline on Friday. They don't try and go hell for leather. They don't try and go for the fastest unless they already know they're going to be the fastest. They tend to start off slow and then work their way up to it. But we do have to take mindset into account here. And even though Lando has been able to get some more points, being able to chew down the lead that Piastri had, which peaked over 30 points around the Dutch Grand Prix. It's now gone down to 22. It's not impossible now. He is going to have to rely, Lando, more on his own talent than any calls on the pit wall, because we're all going to be watching that gantry like a hawk. And also, he has been deploying some very impressive psychological boosts by using Senna-like logic, not apologizing for things, justifying his position, speaking like a champion-elect, which is what people have been clamoring for Lando for ages, and we're now starting to see it. And that, in turn, for his fan base, has been giving them the hope that going into the final few races, they are going to be seeing a more assertive Norris. And I do think he might be able to control the race pace if he is able to start on pole and then remain in pole, going through the twisty-turny bits, and come end of lap 1. That maybe, if he could just keep himself out of trouble, no controversies, be it with Verstappen, Piastri, Russell, et al., then it might be plain sailing for him. The C1 tyre might be solid enough. I think he might even be confident enough to start on the C3s and then go from there, just relying on all of the others completely falling off, especially if it ends up being hot, because the McLaren does work in hotter climates. And then if it turns out the two-stop is actually a little bit faster, McLaren might be even more dominant. It could easily be a 1-2. In short, I think this is a good opportunity for Lando to push himself away from Verstappen that little bit more, correct the mistakes of what he saw in Baku and Singapore, and then get himself that much closer to Piastri. If it's first for him and third for Oscar, then that's cutting the lead that Oscar has on him nearly in half. And I will now cut away over to this video that YouTube and I think you'll really like, and I'll see you over there, but with a different change of clothing.